Current time is about 9:48 on this Saturday morning. We are tracking a potential still for active weather as we look toward the first part of next week. Timing still looks like it will probably end up being on Tuesday, late in the day. And by late in the day, I mean probably more late into the evening there. And we do anticipate that all forms of severe weather, including potentially tornadoes, are a possibility. In saying that, there still thankfully remains some fairly significant questions as to exactly how strong the line will be when it moves into the area, and whether or not it'll be honestly more than just a line. Give me a moment to see if I can get my chat up here to kind of see some of the messages y'all are putting in. I appreciate y'all for tuning in the way we do. And I'm going to try to pull this up without it being my audio as well, so I can just kind of check and see all that. All right. So let's go ahead and get started here by looking at the overall risk area. And in some ways, it's a very similar risk area to where we had things over the course of the last couple of days here. A slight expansion farther south versus yesterday. And really, there's been kind of this, we're really trying to finesse the location. And I should, remind you here, that logo you see there in the corner of that image, a reminder that our thoughts and prayers with those good folks at NOAA and National Weather Service that, frankly, have lost their jobs. Important to what we do, and as great as I am at what I do, and I appreciate all the praise that people give me, and this is not me on my soapbox, it's just a very short thing to say. There's a lot of people at the National Weather Service and at NOAA that provide the content that make this graphic, for example, that we show, and we do finesse from time to time, but keep the radars going, do research, do lots of things to make sure that what we do is as accurate as it can be. So thoughts and prayers with those folks there. They definitely need their support, and we in the broadcast community cannot live without what they do. All that to say, back to the graphic here for a moment, and you can see there has been, again, that adjustment farther south on this orange kind of risk area here. We're still at that time frame where it won't be until tomorrow that we see that level 1 risk show up on here. And that'll be obviously outside of our area. We will likely all be in level 3, maybe level 2 risk by the time this event comes. But there are some questions as to how much moisture is in place. There's some structural things with the atmosphere that could hopefully limit discrete storms, individual storms forming ahead of the line. But all these questions are very similar to what we typically have this far out. And we've been talking about this for over a week. And I would say in past major severe weather events, we have referenced it this far out. It's like, oh God, it's really, really bad when it gets here. I want to just remind you that, as we get closer here, the state of the science continues to increase, has over the last few years, where we're doing a better and better job identifying these, 7 to 10 days out. And a lot of that comes back to that research we were talking about through Cranston University's work that the folks there at NOAA have put in as well. So just to reference again, there's a lot of things beyond the broadcast community that kind of figures into all of this. With that in mind, let's talk about kind of our overall setup here. And again, this is one of those websites I utilize a lot. Again, talking about a university that's taking some of that data and kind of aggregating it and putting it together here. So this is looking at future precipitation accumulation. See a little chance, a little moisture there on Monday with kind of a lead storm system, and then this as we go into Tuesday. And while at the top of the screen there, you can kind of see where it says Wednesday. Ignore that because 0Z Wednesday on here, if you can read that, it's fairly small. 0Z Wednesday is basically hold on. Are we time change weekend? I think it might be time change weekend. 6 or 7 p.m. Probably should know that, but I'm out of town, so haven't double checked that, but I think it is time change weekend. Anyway, I probably should find that out by the end of this conversation, and I'm sure someone will correct me on that. Long tangent to say, you can see what that reds and oranges and yellows coming in. This represents the 3-hour movement of storms. You can see the individual movement of those 3-hour storms. What I'm looking at is this stuff here in advance, and the question of whether or not we get discrete individual storms in advance. This particular projection here, which is one I tend to like at this time frame, does not really show much in the discrete forming ahead. I can't say that's shocking at all. I think it's primarily line of storms moving in. This is the time frame between around 6 to 9 p.m., 6 to 10 p.m. or so on Tuesday night, and this would be between really about 9 p.m. and midnight or so on your Wednesday night. So as you can see, the arrival time probably as early as we would say maybe, well, the western part of our area, possibly in that 7 p.m. time period. Back this up one more. Yeah, as early as maybe 6 to 7 p.m. And then probably exiting largely after, say, midnight, after 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. So in a lot of ways, similar time frame to when we had storms a few weeks ago. And in some ways, you could argue similar potential, maybe probably greater potential out of this, but similar potential wouldn't be off the table. It's kind of a cross your fingers best case scenario. I know we did have a couple of F1 tornadoes, and that is not to diminish that. But anytime we can eliminate a greater threat than that, with these kind of setups, that is kind of a better case scenario. And so we're still refining that top end potential. But as you can see there, that's generally time frame. We'll say as early as maybe 6 p.m. or so. And could it float sooner than that? Yes, if things sped up. Or as late as, say, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning near the Alabama state line. So that's really a time frame there that we are working to refine. And speaking to that point, I'm going to go look at a slightly different site here that we look at. We're looking at something we talked about yesterday, that measure of moisture based on the same scale as the temperature, that dew point there. And you'll notice what I'm looking at is kind of, for lack of a better way to put this, hill of moisture that you see there, kind of this peak, this ridge of moisture there. This is looking at the particular projection we were looking at a moment ago, the ECMWF. And so sometimes we call that the European. We kind of slide that down a little more. So there, that kind of gives it better. So you can see that hill of moisture there representing the moisture from the European, right? And so I want to show you how we still have a pretty decent variety there between what that would be closer to the 45 corridor on a different version of the same projection. Slightly more moisture, similar position, maybe slightly east on the GDPS. This would be what we sometimes call the American model, the GFS. It is substantially faster. Kind of in the middle, the icon. The NAM is another American model. It's a higher resolution model, and we're getting that time frame where we get more of these mesoscale models, these higher resolution models. And so that then helps us to kind of refine things a little bit more. But you'll notice a similar positioning between this UK Met, UK like United Kingdom, RDPS, NAM, and then if I go back over here to the European, they all tend to have a fairly similar positioning. Now it comes down to the amount of moisture that we're dealing with. And so that look at that hill there, and it's on kind of the west side of that hill, that ridge there is where we have the greatest influx. You'll notice that there tends to be a very narrow corridor. And so with a narrower corridor of moisture, and sometimes behind the scenes we'll call that just-in-time moisture. With that narrower just-in-time moisture corridor, a lot of times that limits the overall number of discrete individual storms, supercells that run ahead of the line. And hopefully that's the case. You tend to have those closer to the line. Now you still have them. And like what we had a couple weeks ago, you get that maybe one or two that are just ahead of the line, that as they merge with the line, you have the extra spin, and that's where you do get that tornado potential. But I would still say tornado potential is there. Damage wind potential remains significant as well on this. So this is, again, one time frame that's showing around the 6 to maybe 7 p.m. time frame. I'm advancing this slightly greater. You notice we lose over here, what I'm kind of mousing over at the top here. We don't have as many high resolution models that now go to that, beyond that time frame there. And so that's why we're kind of looking at lower resolution stuff as we look at that time closer to midnight. So this would be closer to midnight that we're analyzing this time here. And so European we're showing there closer to the Alabama state line at that point. I mean, so you can see it's kind of, with the exception of what we call the American model, the GFS, there's a similar positioning. I don't necessarily agree with the leftover kind of pooled moisture that some of these kind of have in some of those other time frames. So again, there's a lot of questions, I would say, on the available moisture. Another way to probably show this that I kind of like on this, I'm going to go back to that European for a moment here. I'm going to look at what we'll call theta E. And this allows us to look, and I'm going to look kind of different versions of this model going back in time a little bit. But this kind of allows us to see the kind of combination of heating, the amount of warmth there, heating and moisture, because instability fuel for thunderstorms, kind of the heating and moisture combination is what is important. If you just have a ton of moisture but you're cold, you don't necessarily get the lift, and we need the surface-based lift. The front coming in will provide that, but the individual thunderstorms in advance need that combination in order to occur. And you'll notice, if we're kind of go back here a moment, 21Z would be afternoon, late afternoon, before sunset. Clearly, there's a preference back to the west, and I want to point that out to say that's part of the reason why you see the center of this is that close to the delta. The individual thunderstorms were more likely to form out here to the west, and certainly that moisture and that fuel is greater there. And as that line moves east, it's going to, if the storms are forming in a significant way, there is maintenance moisture there. So kind of like your car, what it takes you to get up to speed on the highway, your car revs up a lot more, right? It goes, when it gets the highway speed, it tends to lock in at a, it requires less fuel. I know my sound effects are great. Anyway, it requires less fuel and less power input in order to maintain speed. Same thing happens with thunderstorms. Thunderstorms get going out here. It takes more of a punch from a front. It takes more combination of heating and moisture to get them going, but then you still have to maintain them with a significant, substantial amount of fuel. It just might not be as much of the heating component to go along with that fuel as well. So the instability still has to be there, but it's easier to maintain than it is to start. So that's why when we look at this, you'll notice the red colors to the west are much more substantial than they are to the east. And again, this is where we're developing. This is where we're maintaining. And how much do we have to maintain with? That's the question. So this stops at 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. I point that out. That's kind of go, no go time. If we don't have these storms severe enough, strong enough at that point, we're not maintaining them. If they're not already formed and discrete and individual by themselves ahead at that point, we're probably not developing them. So that's why that's kind of the critical time. And so I'm going to look at what we call comparison product. And we're going to look at previous runs. Let me zoom this in to where it's a little bigger there. And so that gives us an idea, generally speaking. So we go back to when we were talking yesterday. Give me a moment here. This graphic, when we were talking yesterday, you can see this is the positioning as of 9 to 10 o'clock, closer to the Mississippi River. Notice slight shift east, slight shift west. These kind of back and forth shifts are to be expected. First thing I instantly noticed, though, is if you look at this kind of brighter orange, where you see where it says, like, at the top there, it says 331K. Don't worry about what 331K represents. Worry about just remember that 331 for a moment, okay? Now, you'll notice that 330, 331 is a little farther south. Not a lot, but that's probably 40 or 50 miles farther south. So the amount of fuel for instability on this farther south as opposed to where it is now. One of the factors that, again, is there enough there to maintain severe thunderstorms? Yes. Is there enough there to maintain potentially tornado-producing thunderstorms? Yes. Is there enough there for a widespread outbreak of death and destruction all over the place? Probably not. But again, if it hits you, it's a big deal, right? And we are still, today's Saturday. We have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So we're still 3 full days. I'm at Saturday morning here. So, 3.5 days essentially away. And models tend to underdo moisture and have kind of a poor resolution as to, the amount of the way the surface features line up with this until we get a little closer. Still more than enough evidence to support what the Storm Prediction Center has put out here on the severe weather risk area, which I completely agree with at this point here, a preference to the west, at least a level 3 risk that includes most of our area. I think we're checking all the boxes there, correct. And so as far as preparation is concerned, that's where we need to be, thinking ahead. Tuesday evening, Tuesday night, where we're going to be, what are we going to do, where we're going to shelter, all that information. Certainly, I think we need to be thinking about. The other thing I want to check before we kind of wrap this up here is as we look at the moisture, and the dew point is one of the ways we show that. And if I do the comparison product on that as well there, this is, showing during the event the amount of moisture there. And clearly, this knows if we go back, day or so, really that's 27th, that'd be about a day and a half. Double check me there. That would be there, well, close to about 2 days. You'd see how you had that moisture as of 8 or 10 p.m. there. There's definitely this funneling of greater moisture back to the west. So we kind of bring it to the current one. There has been a shift farther east by that point, and that does mean that things are speeding up. So two things that means. Clear cut on a speeding up of this would mean we're more likely still have the heating component, and that would then place us more potential of, if for whatever reason we got a greater influx of moisture, to maybe see some of those isolated storms. So you see, we're getting conflicting information, and that always happens at this time frame. So what does this all mean, and what do we need to do? First off, obviously we'll have another update tomorrow as we get closer. This is not the highest of high-end severe weather events. Let's just be clear about that. There's some posts running around social media, death and destruction on the highest level. That's not this. Now, we absolutely could potentially see an upgrade to a higher risk level as confidence increases as we get closer. And could that include part of our area? Potentially. It would take a lot more confidence on the lower level moisture for that to occur, because again, this graphic is math, right? And so if you have multiple opportunities to see severe weather, and those opportunities are significant, that increases the odds that you're going to have an issue. It's kind of like if in baseball, your odds of hitting the baseball increase if you have 3 at-bats versus 1 at-bat. And so when you get discrete storms, individual storms ahead of a line plus the line, the math is greater that you have a greater chance of being hit, right? All things being equal. And so I don't know, with the discrete being still somewhat a question of our area, if we necessarily see a risk level upgrade, because again, the math might not work out on that. Either way, if you're in this zone, I would anticipate Saturday, late afternoon into the overnight hours, the potential for at least one line of thunderstorms that comes in that will produce damaging winds and possibly tornadoes. 2, I'd expect that it's possible that maybe 1 or 2 of those tornadoes could be strong. I'm looking to see a greater amount of lower level moisture for that to be the case, and in a more expansive area ahead of that. I don't know if those 2 things happen. Regardless, it's a possibility. We need to have that on the table. So that is what we're watching. Tomorrow, what I will have a better eye on, we'll be able to discuss more, is some higher resolution modeling is going to throw everything up in the air, because what happens is they try to come up with an exact solution, and we don't have exact data going in. It's the positioning can sometimes be, some will be faster, some will be slower, some will be stronger, some will be weaker. That always happens. So I think tomorrow, while I'll have a lot more kind of to show you on those sorts of things, at the exact same time, I don't know that our confidence is going to go up a lot. This looks like what we typically see out of a severe weather event, 3-ish days ahead. And so everything's in place for that to happen. But any, I guess, alignment to these historic severe weather events we've had, I don't see enough there for that at this point. That's not to say that the moisture doesn't all of a sudden pump in here. There's something we've missed, and that changes as we get closer. But let's put some of that anxiety to rest for a moment here. So that's our update. I don't want you to read too much into the fact that we're doing these updates. I'm just about information and trying to pass along that information as we get closer. But again, thank you for watching. Support those folks, at the National Weather Service and Storm Prediction Center. As great as what I am and what we do, we can't do our job without them, and frankly, them in full force. So our thoughts and prayers are with those folks going through this now. Their jobs save lives in ways that maybe aren't always evident here. Okay, so I'm going to say a prayer for them. Then I'm going to say a prayer for everybody. And then I'm going to go get some beignets with the family. Dear God, this is not exactly an easy economy for anybody right now. But for those that have lost their job, that have dedicated their lives to serving the public and not getting rich, God, be with them right now. Help give them guidance as to what their next steps should be. Help them to find support among their friends and family and others that don't even know them. God, just help them with their anxiety. Just guide them to their next steps. Just help them to find their faith and trust in you in this moment. And I just thank you so much for the incredible commitment that they make, in some cases going without pay for government shutdowns, and just so many sacrifices that they have made. And so just be with them, encourage them in this time. And God, for everyone else out there, I just pray that you guide them to make smart plans for next Tuesday, that you prepare me, and guide me to prepare them accordingly. But most importantly, out of everything, God, just help them with their anxiety so it's not as great, so they don't worry as much. Um, because I know that you've got things under control, and that if this does start to look even, if it starts to look worse than it is, that you give me the words to guide them to action, not an anxious reaction. um, and just be with them in this time. I just thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for your Son, your grace, and your mercy for us. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So again, we will have another update, probably a little earlier than this, tomorrow morning. But we'll definitely kind of figure some things out there. I appreciate everybody for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye. Okay. Oh, and I actually have some of your comments over here. I say that. Let me just double check here, make sure there's not something uh, super vital I need to check out here. But for whatever reason, the comments are actually daylight savings March 9th. It is not this weekend. I'm glad. I knew somebody would correct me on that. I appreciate that. God, it always creeps up on me this time of year. Okay, I appreciate that. There's always something. As as a human being, there's always something you miss. Okay, I'll double check. There's a couple other things here. I'm checking for messages real quick. But okay. Okay, we'll talk to y'all soon.